I was born in Nairobi, and like any kid born in Nairobi, did lots of things that many of you would have done. We had lots of fun. We had a lot of improvising as we played with our friends and really grew up. Just a few examples. Polythene bags would become soccer balls. We call them balls at Juala. Tubing from tires would be improvised to be the launching power behind catapults. We call them feya. Ball bearings from drive shafts that were no longer of use would become the wheels that would become our go-karts. Yes, we had a lot of fun, we had a lot of ingenuity. Coat hangers, guess what they became? Cars. They became cars. They became steering wheels for cars. We were in the real school of learning to be street smart and using our ingenuity. And guess what? We didn't go to La Cordon Bleu, but we did something called Kalongolongo. Yeah, we did hunt and gather and cook, and it wasn't in the house. And yes, those catapults, the fairs that we had, would cause some wild birds to drop from the skies. Or our dustbin laid traps with traps on birds as we, would set the traps for them. And so yeah, that was life for a kid born in the 70s and 80s in Kenya. I understand it's no longer the same. But as kids, I can assure you we never told our parents, I'm bored. There was nothing like being bored as kids. Schooling, however, was not that much fun. Very early in my education, I discovered that I kind of had a hard time recalling things, and I had to read and reread and cram a lot to remember things. I had to read instructions multiple times for me to grasp them. I had to take copious notes in class, and then later on when revising, I would take notes of the notes. We used to call them Wakenya. Do you remember Wakenyas? Yes. I did not take my Wakenyas to the exam, so don't judge me. My Wakenyas were for reading and revising the morning before the exam, because if a week passed, I would not remember anything that I had written, so I would do a Wakenya of the Wakenya to make sure that I revised and I repeat. With repetition, I would remember and remember and remember. And unfortunately, or in hindsight, I'll say fortunately, my teachers, your teachers, my parents, your parents came from the school that said if a kid wasn't doing well in school, if a kid was struggling in school, what you had to do is to shame them to shame. And so I recall one history teacher calling me up in front of the class, sending me to the blackboard and asking me to spell some very basic words. I obviously could not spell those words. I was very embarrassed. But in being embarrassed, also it lit in me a fire that every human spirit has around utaniona. I will show you, I am better than that. And obviously that made a difference in my life. It was just a little fire that was lit, that fighting spirit in me was lit. And it made a difference. I understand it much more today than I understood it then. And by some grace of God, I also fell upon a book by a man called Norman Vincent Peale, The Power of Positive Thinking. How does a kid in Nairobi find a book called The Power of Positive Thinking that becomes instrumental to his life in terms of his outlook for life? And that to me became instrumental, not only to support the fighting spirit, but a belief in me to visualize the possibilities. And little did I not know and understand the power of visualization and really dreaming and grasping things that are not seen. I would later come to realize how powerful that was. And so there you go, a kid that really struggled through high school, didn't make A's, didn't make 36 points, didn't go to the pedigree of schools in Kenya, eventually ended up going to university. But it's not over yet. He didn't go to study Bachelor of Commerce, he didn't go to study to be a doctor or an engineer or any of those fanciful degrees that were offered in Kenya. He went to study a Bachelor of Arts. Again, for those of you who remember those days, Bachelor of Arts was called Bachelor of Anything. And Bachelor of Anything was not what your parents wanted you to go and study. Because you never amounted to anything if you studied Bachelor of Anything. So why even waste your time to go to university? And so that was me. Bachelor of Anything, and to make matters worse, I went to study sociology, philosophy, and literature. Who studies that? Who studies that? But that ended up becoming the gift that would really help the gem that was already starting to be honed in me. Because studying the humanities helped me, one, to develop a lot of critical thinking skills through my philosophy. I would argue with people. I would put up logical arguments like nobody could. As a matter of fact, they called me Aristotle in school. I, like the character from Shakespeare's plays called The Fool, was called The Fool by my friends. Not because I was down, but because the fool had this nugget of wisdom in a very whimsical way. The fool would tell the emperor, through nuggets of wisdom, that he had no clothes. The fool would give nuggets of wisdom, and guess what? The fool never lost his head. And that was me to my fellow students, the fool. I was Aristotle, and I was a fool. And so they call me Aristotle. So there it goes. Aristotle, very passionate, very philosophical, starting to come out and realize that yes, despite the fact that I have to go through a hard time studying and remembering and memorizing things, guess what I have? I have some weight in me, I have some street smarts that I learned from back when I was a kid and I honed through my life. And importantly, I knew deep in me, and this was right in my spirit, and I thank God for it. I knew that God had my back. I knew that I would amount to something and that I would be, everything that He had created me to be. I did not know how to articulate it, but I knew that yes, against all odds, against all the struggles that I had, that I would amount to something. And so I graduated from KU with my Bachelor of Anything, and enthusiastically and witty and whimsical as I always were. My first set of applications were graduate of the Luz. Guess what? I got an interview, graduate of the Luz. I didn't take the job because it was a sales job and I didn't really care for it at that point. I went on to work for Research International Consulting with marketing executives for CPG companies in Kenya. And then Coca-Cola hired me as a sales analyst. I spent 4 years in Kenya and was privileged enough to relocate with Coca-Cola and spend 4 other years in Morocco. By the time I was in my 6th year, roughly thereabouts, with Coca-Cola, I was the chief of staff to a business unit president for a number of markets covering North and West Africa. And so by all means, I was a success. I had lived a life, I had achieved dreams that many people looked up. And by the way, I was working for the Coca-Cola company. That's a big deal. And so I really felt, yes, thank God, against all odds, I have made a name of myself. Against all odds, I've become something. People admired me. So as I moved from Coca-Cola Africa to the US and I joined corporate America, still with Coca-Cola, the first challenge for me was, okay, so here is this guy from Africa. He has an accent. He's changing careers from the business side to HR. He is not what we consider pedigree for HR professionals. He doesn't have any background, and he wants to work as a talent and development director for some of the business units that are very critical for this great company. No way, he doesn't fit it. He didn't go to the Ivy League schools. And so right off the bat, coming to the US, I was again an odd one, a different person, and one that couldn't cut it. And I remember very well when I was talking to one of my global heads of talent, a New Yorker, and he really brought out the New Yorker in him. He looked at me in the face and said to me, James, I do not see you ever having a conversation with an operating group president, and in particular with the operating group president for the North America business, which by the way is 30% of all the revenues of the company. I just don't see you having a conversation with this person. And so there I was being put in a box. For whatever the reasons, I gave him some credit because he's a New Yorker, so New Yorkers have a very different style, right? So I cut him some slack. But like my history teacher, guess what that did? It lit a fire in me. And I was like, I'm not being put in that box. And so as I started going through the process for getting that job, guess who shows up? CJ shows up. CJ was the head of HR for Coca-cola North America. She's called Caroline Jackson. And she had seen in me my big picture thinking. She had seen in me my wisdom. She had seen in me my ability to connect dots. And like many Kenyans, and we take pride in that, Kenyans have an ability to get work done. And you will agree with me. And so I had that trait in me, and I think it's just our upbringing. We were brought up by teachers and parents that really pushed us really hard. And over and above all those abilities that she saw, she knew I got the work done. And so not having had any prior experience in talent and development, she took a chance on me and made me the head of talent for Coca-cola North America. 30% of the revenues of the company. She didn't beat me up to shape as she taught me how to really work this job. But she believed in me. She saw in me something that many people did not see. And this operating group president that I was once told that, James, I do not see you ever having a conversation with this person. Guess what happened? I was consulting with him every single day. He was referring people to me for talent and development advice and saying, have you guys asked James what he thinks about this? This Kenyan, with an accent, who learns differently, who doesn't fit the mold, who was given a chance, was here consulting at the highest level of the C-suite at one of the most recognized brands in the world. And so what I realized is, over those 20 years in my career, I had got to a path of comfort. That my career had got to a path of comfort. And I wasn't being challenged anymore. And really, it was time for me to move on. And so in May of 2017, I launched Imagination Coach, which is what I do today. It's my business. And soon thereafter, I left Coca-Cola. And it's been very fruitful for me. I've worked and helped people in ways that I would never have imagined. I thought I had it when I was at Coca-Cola. I thought I was making impact, and yes, I impacted thousands of people and worked in the C-suites while I was at Coca-Cola. But those last 2 years since I left Coca-Cola, and I'm now helping people, I'm really touching people in different ways. But what's more important for me is, I'm not in that path of comfort anymore. I'm actually in that straight path, that narrow path, that uncomfortable place. But the conversations that I have every day, the people that I get to work with every day, the people that challenge me and I learn from every day, have stretched me and given me a bigger sense of meaning than I had when I was stuck in 2015. And so I learned a few things. Find the opportunity to believe in somebody. That to me was an important lesson. And lastly, and I'm still learning this, I realized that what brought me to these great heights wasn't going to work anymore. And my ability to control the variables and to be able to control every particular outcome, every formula to success was never going to work. And so I'm still learning that yes, I'm going to let go and let God. Especially when I get to the end of myself. Thank you.